Is this thing on?
Hey, look, new background photo. It's appropriate for tonight, I'd say.
It looks spiffy.
Okay, we're on.
Live and kicking.
We're on crack.
You too. Nice.
Yeah, you're on something.
I didn't think this was Oregon.
Just don't start talking about the Vista Hotel and crack.
Yeah, don't let a bitch set you up or anything, all right? I'm assuming that's the reference he's making, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I may have to go grab a drink.
Yes,
I just had a drink, so...
Courvoisier is preferred.
LCA. You know, also like Scavase, Leon Phelps, the ladies' man from SNL. The Tim Meadows played him, I think. It was a recurring sketch.
All right, welcome in, everybody. We'll give folks a couple more minutes to join us and settle in. This is the Corridor H virtual tour episode. Welcome to the program. We'll get around to introducing the Skype panel momentarily. We gotta wait until Steve comes back with a drink, right?
Yeah.
I'm next to the fridge. We're good.
That's where he's camping out tonight, huh?
If it was brunch, we'd have bottomless mimosas.
Go back to brunch.
Oh, boy.
Peach.
A new running joke has just been born, I think.
Go back to brunch.
Yeah. Yep, kids say the darndest things, don't they?
Oh, they do. I have 19 months of proof of that.
And she's just getting started, too. Just wait until she's
That
18 years old.
Yep.
All right, well, welcome into tonight's program. It's great to have you with us for another Saturday virtual tour episode here on the Roadway Whiz channel. I'm your host. You'll never guess my name. I am Roadway Whiz. Shocker. Let's talk for a second about who's joining us on Skype, because we got a bunch of people joining us in the VIP. Let's see who we got. I got to pull up my list here, because I forgot everybody's name, and I'm going to forget somebody. So, let's see who we got. We got Steve of Alps Roads joining us.
Newly updated.
I saw that before we went live, yeah. We've got Doug from Gribble Nation.
We posted some updates today on Gribble Nation.
Yes, we did. Let's see, we got Josh from Bill's Mafia joining us.
Yo.
He has no updates.
Nah. We got, let's see here, Laura and Mike of MD Roads joining us from Maryland.
We're here. Howdy.
And we've got...
Good day, all.
You want to say hi, Rainey?
I think she does want to say hi.
She does, but she's being a little shy. Say hi.
Yeah, maybe. Nothing. That's all right. We'll get her to say hi at some point. And making his debut on Roadway Whiz Live, we're very pleased to be joined by Pat from Maryland, who is an expert in all things Corridor H. So, Pat, welcome into the program. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Yeah, feel free to...
Thank you. I had to unmute. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of people with us tonight, all of whom are knowledgeable in Corridor H, and so this should be a fun evening as we bat around some topics related to, I think, what is generally considered to be one of the favorite drives in all of West Virginia for most people in the road enthusiast community, and we'll be talking about everything related to the road's history and current events along the way. Before we go any further, announcements. On YouTube, I am starting on my Vermont series. That started earlier this week. That'll be going for a few weeks. That'll get us through most of the month of February. So you will see new content from that state on a daily basis for the next 3 to 4 weeks or so. Doug, what's going on the Gribble Nation end of things?
On the Gribble Nation end of things, I know that I just updated a page on US 6 in Utah. There's been a number of interesting updates from Northern California, like the Caldecott Tunnel, for instance. And, of course, we have plenty of Gribble Nation roadcasts, some new podcasts for you to listen to as well.
We have, on the podcast side of things, we have a new episode out on Friday. I did a profile of some highlights in Delaware. I'm also working on a special Super Bowl preview show, which will come out next week. And I'm sure that the other three folks are working on some stuff in the pipeline as far as podcast episodes are concerned.
Right. We may touch on that later in the virtual tour as well.
We might.
Yep.
I'm sure it'll get slow at some point, and we'll be able to get into more of that stuff as time permits.
Yeah.
This episode tonight is being brought to you by the letter H, as Big Bird is illustrating on the right side of your screen.
And the number 48.
And the number 48.
4 and 8, yep.
So there's that too. I want to call your attention real quick to the bottom left of your screen here. As I mentioned on Facebook the other day, I decided that it was best if we extend the season by a couple of weeks. You can see that down here. Those are the new episodes that we will be featuring in the month of March. It'll culminate in a special season finale event. Probably going to be along the lines of what we did, if you were with us earlier this year, for the Cincinnati event that we did. It was a big PowerPoint event that effectively simulated a road meet in under virtual conditions. So I think we're going to try that again here with the state of Delaware, and we'll see how that goes. I know that I've pretty much got that PowerPoint together already. It's going to be spectacular, so you're going to want to join us for that. All right, so mark March 20th down on your calendar, folks. The only other order of business that I have this week is what you see on your screen right now. We have
Boring.
Yeah, so we have our two teams to do battle 2 Sundays from now for the Vince Lombardi Trophy down in Tampa, Florida. This will be the first time, by the way, that one of the two teams in the Super Bowl is playing in its home stadium. The 2020 season had to throw us something unprecedented in the NFL, and I guess this is it, right? So we're going to see.
Every other part of this is very precedented, though.
Yes, I understand that, but this adds a little bit of uniqueness to the proceedings that we wouldn't have had in any other year.
Just a way to make sure that Brady wins.
The idea of a Mahomes versus Brady Super Bowl is also interesting. They've done battle multiple times before in conference, just never in the big game. So that'll be an interesting subplot to watch.
It'll be a battle of avocado ice cream versus Whataburger. Because Brady, likes the avocado ice cream, and Mahomes wants a Whataburger in Kansas City. I think is actually coming there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't know that about him. All right, so that's your matchup. We will watch it for the next couple of weeks. I'm sure we'll have more to say on this matchup next time, but it's out there, and it's something for you to be aware of from the current events point of view. Our video tonight is going to take us for a full ride on U.S. Route 48, beginning here in the west at I-79 in Weston, West Virginia. We will be following the road eastbound in its entire length to its east end in Strasburg, Virginia. That is a distance
Not very
of
good,
about,
so I drink it so little.
that is a distance of about 150 miles altogether. So we'll be covering, expressway segments out in the west near Elkins. There's a big expressway segment between Davis and Wardensville out in this area. And then there's a bunch of stuff that's incomplete in the middle here that we'll be touching on what's up with those segments and what you can expect out of those as far as the construction timeline is concerned. All right. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Anybody have anything, whether that's folks on Skype or folks in live chat, that we want to get into? Or I think we pretty much, that's a fair introduction, right?
There was one question on the video as to whether there would be any plans to extend I-66 to the west, and it's sort of getting answered in chat right now, but there's no expectation that Corridor H will ever be upgraded past Expressway.
Well, I don't want to talk about that right now anyway, because we're going to talk about that in the video. So, anyway.
We're going to talk about that for 2 hours.
Yeah. So.
I'm only here so I don't get fined.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Marshawn. Our next episode on Saturday is going to be our first of a two-part series of webinars on the state of West Virginia, where we'll start to dive into more of these highways on a more personal level. First part coming up next Saturday is the Charleston area, and so we hope you can join us for that. Tomorrow's episode, we return to the Bridges of the Delaware River series, where we left off last time in Port Jervis, New York, and we're going to cover the bridges all the way down to the city of Trenton, the state capital of New Jersey. And we've got an interesting, to say the least, panel lined up for you for tomorrow, so we hope you join us for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Okay? All right. Well, without further ado, let's get into the video here. This video is just about exactly 2 hours and 30 minutes in length. It begins at milepost 98 on Interstate 79 northbound in Weston, West Virginia. It'll take us all the way to Interstate 81 outside of Strasburg, Virginia. Your trip along ADHS Corridor H in a clinch of US 48 begins right now. Welcome in. Got a little bit of an interchange project going on here at the west end of US 48 where it meets I-79, as you can see in the video. Looks to me like they're just reconfiguring the interchange ramps here. I didn't really read much into what they're doing here exactly, but that seems to be all that they're really accomplishing here.
4-level stack.
Yeah.
Hooray!
Yeah.
I see way too many mountains that haven't been torn down yet. There's plenty of room for one.
Yeah, so we are turning onto US 48 East. This we should let you guys know, this is the oldest section of Corridor H to be built. It was built mostly in the 70s. Why don't we take a couple minutes here at the start just to kind of outline what Corridor H is and a little bit of the history of its western end. Why don't you guys bat that around for a couple of minutes? I mean, you guys have to. That requires you guys to open your mouths too. So feel free to do that whenever you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready. So basically, Corridor H was one of the corridors of the Appalachian Development Highway System. But several different lettered corridors were established from New York down south, basically to drive economic development through the Appalachian Mountains. So that's why you sometimes hear this referred to as Corridor H, but also as US 48, because US 48 is what is ultimately the road that covers this whole thing. But basically, the whole western section from Weston to Elkins was built in phases from 1972 to 1994. And it was all pretty much actually built in order, with one exception being the Racetrack portion that was built east of Elkins that never got incorporated in. But every single other section, so from 1972, you had the I-79 interchange. 1975, you had it go to Horner and County Route 15 in Lewis County. 1976, extended to Upshur County near Lawrence. 79, another 3 miles were put on. 1991, it went from Lawrence to Buckhannon. And then 1994 was the longest section that went the rest of the way towards Elkins.
Pat, do you want to chime in as far as history and just like an overview of the corridor in general, and anything you'd like to say about the western end of the highway here? What is going on with the audio all of a sudden? Why are we not getting people to...
Patrick's on mute.
Well, he should be able to see the video. Is there an issue on his end, or like, what are we doing?
I mean, it shows his name up on the screen, but with the little mute sign. So I don't know if he's trying to talk.
All right. Well, somebody please talk about Corridor H, other than Laura, because she did a fantastic job, and she's going to get a gold star by the end of this presentation.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thank you. But yes, I would like other people to chime him in.
Yeah, sure. So this is the oldest section of Corridor H. It is also by far the most heavily used section of Corridor H. As of right now, the section west of Elkins is the only part of Corridor H that actually has the traffic counts to support a 4-lane expressway. So you might see some other cars now. Don't get too used to seeing other cars.
Well, yeah, don't get too used to seeing a 4-lane divided highway either. Because once we get past Elkins, we will reach sections of US 48 which have not been completed. But as Laura said, this was the first section of Corridor H to be built. I'm sorry.
It also goes through the most heavily populated parts of the towns along the corridor, like Buckhannon and Elkins. Like Elkins, for instance, has about 7,000 people according to the 2010 census, and Buckhannon has about 5,500 people. So that's actually so there's more people in the areas. There's a little bit more business going on, and I think that Buckhannon and Elkins are both the county seats of their respective counties as well. So, and of course, Weston is actually also a county seat.
Is one of you on Skype able to reconnect with Pat? Because he's saying that he lost the connection. Or do I have to do it myself?
Okay, so, and meanwhile, I'll try to figure out what we're doing. So here, okay, what do we have here? Because I took this westbound, so I'm trying to, so as everything's reversed for me, but, okay. Elkins has been bypassed.
Are you guys able to hear what I'm saying here?
No,
A little bit.
Well, what? Yeah, because I don't know why we're having issues with people not talking and not saying stuff. I mean, do I need to stop the video to figure out what's going on here?
I was going to wait till we got to a less heavily traveled stretch of highway to start ragging on it.
Yeah, I don't know why we're having issues here.
There's not really a ton to talk about here. It's a pretty straightforward section of expressway.
Well, I think basically what I want to say is that basically I know that we're getting closer to Buckhannon, which actually has a lot of history to it. So basically, what happened is that there were soldiers from the English Army during the French and Indian War that essentially, they're the ones that discovered, Buckhannon essentially, and they took up residence in the hollow stump of a sycamore tree, which hopefully that's a big sycamore tree for two people to kind of live in. So what happened from there is that they eventually they lived there for a few years, and hopefully they found more comfortable quarters than a stump of a tree. So what happened is that they hunted, they fished, and they eventually founded a settlement. So Buckhannon is actually named after a Buckhannon River, which is, basically they say it's actually was named after a Lenape chief by the name of Buckhannon. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. It was, but essentially that was anglicized to Buckhannon, which to me, I thought it was a different spelling for Buchanan, but I guess it's actually a different origin for the name. Buckhannon also, to my understanding, has a strawberry festival.
I have been to the Strawberry Festival.
And how was that Strawberry Festival?
Rather underwhelming. It's essentially an excuse for everyone in the county to get together in one place and have neighbors for a day. Since
that sounds
people
like
generally,
West Virginia.
People in the whole county, and really most of the terrain traversed by Corridor H is very rural. People, I'm going to use the word holler here, but in the most affectionate sense, that people really live in hollers, around curves, under hillsides, in houses next to broken down older houses that will someday become broken down themselves. It's fascinating to drive through there, and it's some insight into why Corridor H hasn't really done a whole lot at this point, and there's no certainty that it's going to do much even when completed, just because you don't spur economic development in an area that is so undeveloped just by building a highway.
Of course, my argument is that, basically with West Virginia being the way the terrain is set up, it actually is beneficial to have highways that people can actually get to from point A to point B without having to make a bajillion curves and turns. So I actually think like the straight modern highway is actually of benefit to places like Buckhannon and Elkins and Weston. Also, with Buckhannon, the former general manager of the Memphis Grizzlies, a gentleman by the name of Chris Wallace, happened to be a native of Buckhannon, West Virginia. But he was also a general manager of the Boston Celtics before becoming the general manager of the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was a long-time basketball general manager. So,
okay.
I see here's the exit for Philippi, I think that I should pronounce it. And if you go up 119 and 20, there is in Philippi I think the best way to say it is a two-lane or it's a two-lane covered bridge, essentially. There's two portals. And there's separating. That's right in is the Philippi covered bridge, and that's right in Philippi.
Is Pat back with us yet? Do you guys have the ability to see who's on the call right now and who isn't?
It looks like he's on the call.
Okay.
I saw him drop out, and then he came back in.
Well,
I think I'm on the call now.
All right. I think I hear him now. Yeah. Pat? Can you please...
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I'm here.
Okay. Well, before we lost you, we wanted to ask you if you had anything to give us as far as information, as far as the corridor in general, and also this western segment that we're traversing right now.
A couple things. The western segment is the oldest segment of Corridor H. There's nothing in the eastern section that's nearly this long. There's a fair amount, at least the last time I was on this section of the road, there's a fair amount of button copy on it, certainly around as you head east from I-79 and especially around Buckhannon, there's a fair amount of button copy there where 119 turns off if you're heading east. And, the pavements, you can tell, is a little older. When we get to the eastern part of Corridor H, you'll see that the pavement is much newer there. The other thing that's kind of a fairly recent innovation is that this part of Corridor H is finally signed as US 48. For a long time, it was not signed. It was only signed as US 33 and US 119. And the piece up by between Elkins and Kearns, K-E-R-E-N-S, but apparently pronounced Kearns, that was just signed as US 219, but it's all signed as US 48. And the non-expressway part, where Corridor H is not finished, is now signed, I think, pretty well continuously from Kearns all the way to where the eastern part of Corridor H picks up at Davis. So that's all I'll share for now.
Yeah, so this is the third iteration of US 48 to be used. The first one was out in California, and I think, Doug, you'll confirm this for me. You know this, right? The first one was out in Central California, I want to say.
Yeah, I actually want to say it was it was actually in the San Francisco Bay Area. It actually went from San Jose in, of course, at US 101 to US 99 in French Camp, which is in San Joaquin County. Actually, I thought it was also part of the Lincoln Highway at one time, but I don't believe that's actually the case. It was actually one of the first U.S. highways in the country to be deleted. It was the first U.S. highway to be deleted in California.
Yeah, well, now California practically has none. But,
yeah, except for like 101 and 6 and 395 and
101 will be I-3. Wait for it.
Yeah.
395 will be I-9.
Wait, I thought I-3 was going to be in Georgia.
It'll connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll pull an I-16 and I on us somehow.
Yeah. So that was the first US 48, and then the number was decommissioned and not moved or not used for a long time, and then it popped up again for another ADHS corridor that we're actually going to profile in a couple of weeks. That would be Corridor E between Morgantown and Hancock, Maryland. That designation lasted until about 1991, when the entirety of Corridor E was completed to freeway standard and re-signed as Interstate 68. So this is actually the second ADHS corridor to receive the US 48 designation. And the US 48 number has been in place for, what do you guys think, like 20, 30 years? Something like that?
Not even. I actually would say it is closer to about 10 years, actually.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It hasn't... Yeah, I'm a current US 48 has only been assigned for around 10 years.
Okay. So yeah, this is the third US 48, and I think it's fair to say that this one is going to have some staying power because there isn't an interstate upgrade waiting in the wings for any of this.
Correct. I wanted to add.
Yeah.
Thanks. You did a great job talking about US 48 that became I-68.
Thank you. I actually rehearsed that before we went live.
Awesome. So to add a little more background, what's interesting about regarding staying power is that Maryland's SHA, State Highway Administration, actually did not plan on giving US 48 interstate status. They had planned on using the I-68 number for the section of US 50 between Washington to Annapolis. But ultimately, they later decided to just keep that as US 50 and as secret Interstate 595. So that ultimately kind of shook loose the I-68 number. And then, around that time, 1991 was when everything was completed. And that's when it was decided to change the whole thing from US 48 to I-68, despite the fact that there are a couple of sections that are older that are not up to interstate standards.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly
Cumberland.
Yes, Cumberland. Yes. That's the big one.
Yeah, that's the legendary one that we'll be talking about quite extensively when it comes time to do Corridor E. But... On the subject of this section of highway, we're approaching the town of Elkins. Let's see, what does this sign say here? We're about 10 minutes out from Elkins. I'm under the impression that when this initial section of Corridor H was built in the 70s, that they had a significantly more southerly route planned for this highway than what we're seeing get built today. I mean, now we're seeing it curve to the north, kind of, around Parsons and Davis, and then looping down to Strasburg, taking a more northerly path. And I think now we should probably bring up something that I've heard about, but I didn't actually see while I was out here filming this. That's known as what they're calling the Racetrack. So this was a segment of Corridor H that was built, I suppose, in the 70s, somewhere around there, right? And then it was...
1970s, that's correct.
Yeah, and so the Racetrack was part of the original scheme for Corridor H. It follows the US 33 alignment east out of Elkins, right?
That is correct. So, go ahead, Patrick, if you wanted to say something.
I think you're on a roll. Yeah. Somebody go ahead and talk.
Oh, okay, I'll go. So basically, the initial plan was, so it was built in 1976. The racetrack is a section east of Elkins that goes from Canfield to Bowden. The intent was that it was going to connect with a northern Elkins bypass that was never built. The route was going to continue along US 33 to Seneca Rocks, and then pick up West Virginia 55, which then becomes Virginia 55 to Strasburg. Which, if you look on a map, West Virginia 55, just if you look on Google right now, it's actually not the primary route signed on there. So if you're looking, it would be from West Virginia 28 up to Petersburg, and then US 220 to Moorfield, is what's signed on that map. So what's kind of interesting about the racetrack is that was the intended alignment. That was the alignment that was planned in 1981 to continue. There was opposition. It was put on hold until 1990. They decided to resurrect it, and then they decided to go. It was 1993 when they looked at an alternate route, which is what is being built today, north of Elkins to Moorfield and then to Virginia. But there was a lot of opposition to that route, too. So in 1996, they went back and made a record decision issued on the route going east of Bowden. And then that led into a bunch of lawsuits. So what was ultimately decided, long story short, at the end of these lawsuits, one which was ruled in favor of FHWA and the West Virginia DOT, and the other ruled for the Corridor H Alternatives Group. What was ruled in favor for them was that all historic properties need to be fully studied before construction proceeds. So they won that, but they ultimately did not win the alignment argument. They appealed. An agreement was finally reached in December 1999 that it was going to take the more northern route and that it was going to be divided into 9 separate projects. Interestingly, the easternmost section in West Virginia, from Wardensville to the state line, had special restrictions that were not to exceed 20 years, which I can't determine. There was apparently an amendment to that in 2003, so I'm not certain if we're past the 20 years or if we're in year 18 right now of that. But the point was that that last section was to be restricted unless Virginia, got on the ball, or if there was, a huge significant need increase in traffic, or an issue with Appalachian Highway funding that would cause it to be built earlier. But that's ultimately how the alignment argument shook out.
That's correct, and the 20-year restriction on the easternmost part of Corridor H unbuilt from just west of Wardensville to the West Virginia border has now expired, and I believe that section of road is in preliminary or maybe even in final engineering. So it's coming along pretty well. And now what's not happening is there's nothing going on in Virginia that anybody will comment on officially. So that's kind of where we're at on that. And we're coming up actually to Norton, West Virginia on the screen, where there's a traffic light that's had a fair amount of crashes at it. There are no crashes. There are no traffic signals on Eastern Corridor H at all. There are several on Western Corridor H, including the one we're coming up to right now.
Has there ever been any discussion about getting rid of these signals in favor of some kind of interchange of some kind at each of these intersections? I mean, obviously the intersections date to the 70s when this was built. Obviously, they were building to a much different standard than they are with the new sections of the highway. But has there been any movement or any discussion on that front lately?
I have never heard any discussion of really any material upgrading of Western Corridor H. And now they may be, and I'm speculating here, that West Virginia DOT may say, well, let's get the entire thing built and then we can go back and discuss that. But that's speculative on my part.
Well, that would make sense too, yeah.
So we're coming up. I think this is the last signal we just passed on. We're either coming up to. I think we're coming up to the last signal on the western part of Corridor H.
Yeah.
Once past this, you have some pieces that are not completed yet, but there are no traffic signals beyond this western entrance into to Elkins.
Mm-hmm. There's really no development after that point.
Yeah, there isn't any traffic out there, so.
Yeah, well, the Elkins is probably the last. It's probably the biggest town that we're going to pass by on this drive,
yes.
Right? It's a pretty significant town in its own right. By West Virginia standards, it's a pretty sizable city. But that's pretty much the final outpost before we hit the more wilderness-like drives that we're going to encounter further east.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Parsons is also a county seat where Corridor H will, the terminus there will be fairly soon. And then also Moorfield is also a county seat. I believe that might be Grant County. I'm not sure. Parsons is a county seat of Tucker County. So you do have, and Elkins is the county seat of Randolph County. So you do have some county seats here. But Parsons is a pretty small town. It was so small that the Sheets even closed that used to be in downtown Parsons, much to the unhappiness of some of us that like going to stop at Sheets.
No, not Sheets.
And also some of us who like to be able to go to the bathroom.
Well, another chain took the place over, but I certainly preferred it better when Sheets when it was a Sheets there.
Has any other town lost a Sheets? Because that's a pretty. Because that's something you don't hear of very often.
The only thing that I've seen that comes even close to that is there used to be a Sheets on US 6 in downtown Coudersport, Pennsylvania, that moved to, and I use this term loosely, to suburban Coudersport on kind of the west side of town. But that's the only one I could think of. There is one other one that's closed, and I think it might have been temporary, on the west side of Fredericksburg, Virginia, in the Central Park shopping center, gigantic shopping center. And I don't know if it moved or what the story, if that was temporary or not. But those are the only two that I'm aware of that have anything like that. So it is unusual for Sheets to close something.
Yeah. A lot of times the Sheets, like Port Allegheny, PA, is another one where I think they just wound up basically moving it to a different location in town when they decided to build a more modern store.
Yeah,
we are now on the most modern part of Western Corridor H, from here to Kearns. This is about as modern construction as Eastern Corridor H. So we do get a taste of what's ahead here on this last section of Western Corridor H that we're now passing. We're coming up to US 219.
This interchange up here is US 33 hops off and US 219 hops on.
Yeah, US 219, the road from Elkins to Bill Stadium.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But Elkins is named after a gentleman by the name of Stephen Benton Elkins, who was a former U.S. Senator from West Virginia, and he was also the Secretary of War at one time. There's other politicians that also have called Elkins home. Henry Gasaway Davis was also a U.S. Senator from West Virginia, and he was also a Democratic candidate for vice president in 1904. And then you have William Wallace or Wally Barron. He preferred to be known as Wally. He was a former West Virginia governor, and he was later indicted for bribery and jury tampering.
Sounds like he should have been in the Nixon administration.
How old was he?
Well,
he was around at that time. He was actually the governor of West Virginia during the 1960s, so he
all right, yeah.
very well could have been brought into the Nixon administration.
The other thing about Henry Gasaway Davis, the town of Davis, West Virginia, is apparently named for Henry Gasaway Davis. He owned a lot of land that was logged and had coal mined from it in the area around Thomas, Davis, and up into southern Garrett County, Maryland. And a lot of that land was denuded. It was clear cut down to nothing, and that was one of the motivations behind the founding of what is now Monongahela National Forest. They basically reforested all that land, and that is why it looks like a pretty good forest today. But apparently, everything was clear cut up in that area, and so his name was used in day. And I think there's also a Gasaway. I don't remember where it is. There's a place called Gasaway in West Virginia, which is also in Henry Gasaway Davis's name. And of course, ironically, he's actually from, I believe he was born in Howard County, Maryland, and he started working for what was then the infant Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Coming up
in Woodstock, Maryland.
That's right. You were just passing a maintenance base. Excuse me. There's another one of these that West Virginia DOH has on Eastern Corridor H, but that's one, and I think those were basically purpose-built to support maintenance activities on Corridor H by the state. So, and
another fact about Henry Gasaway Davis, he was actually Stephen Benton Elkins was Davis's son-in-law. So they had a bit of a family connection as well.
All in the family.
Yep. Elkins was also a railway town. The West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh Railway went into Elkins in 1889, which opened that area for development.
Something else I should probably mention here. If you haven't noticed, this road has a 65 mile per hour speed limit. West Virginia is the easternmost state that is willing to assign a 65 mile an hour speed limit on a road with multiple accurate intersections.
But it's a freeway, Josh.
Yeah.
Freeway schmeeway.
Yeah, it's a West Virginia.
West Virginia
freeway.
Says this is a freeway.
Yeah, West Virginia, we know how there's the term Jersey Freeway. Well, this is a West Virginia freeway.
It's good enough. It's good enough for me.
Yeah, and
it says freeway ends to prove it.
I think the freeway's about to end here, folks.
Yes, yeah, we're coming up to Kearns, and if you drive this now, you can see all the construction going on straight ahead. There was a lot of stuff staged there without much construction activity going on, but now the construction is certainly going on full blast through there. But yeah, you're forced off onto what is effectively old US 219 to make the trip from here to Parsons and then on up to Thomas, and then you have another road. You have to take State Route 32 to get back to Corridor H.
Now, are they doing this?
I think we should go that way. You guys want to go that way?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, let's do that.
Woo, let's do it.
Let's go. Let's follow 219 for a little while. And here's
are they constructing all of Corridor H in one shot here, or are they doing this in two pieces like Pennsylvania did with 99?
It's two pieces.
Yep.
The construction from roughly Parsons, on the edge of Parsons to Davis, that's not even in preliminary engineering. yet. And the last I saw, and this may change now with the change in administration, that wasn't planned for preliminary engineering until sometime after the year 2030. But I think there may be pressure to speed that up now, coming from the new administration. That's speculative on my part, but I think there's some consensus on that, and who knows, that might actually induce West Virginia, or pardon me, Virginia, to speed up getting their part of Corridor H into preliminary engineering. But again, that's a little speculative on my.
It's important to note that overpass that we just passed underneath was built as part of the previous segment, and it's been used for many years. But it will become used in a couple of years when the new section of Corridor H up towards Parsons is opened. But now we join the at-grade, soon-to-be old segment of Corridor H, US 48. It's a two-lane fun fest. Hey, look, there's a truck in the way. So, again, let's talk about the segment that's under construction right now. We did kind of give you an overview here about a minute ago, but this new segment is going to basically split the difference between Kearns and Parsons. If you take a couple of the roads off to the right here, as we're going up through here the next couple of miles, if you were to pull onto the side roads here and go about a mile to the east, that'll take you to some of the construction areas for the new section. And I posted some pictures on my Facebook page related to that, so you can go check those out if you want. But you can see that some of the sections of it are very well advanced at this point. We'll come up on a bridge that's being built high above the old road right now in a few miles. But I get the impression that we're still about 2 to 3 years away from the completion of this segment that's in progress right now.
At least.
I saw a posting just today claiming that they would be done this year, as in 2021. I don't believe that, though, because the contract that the work is being done under, and this is apparently standard practice in West Virginia, is only the contract that's in there now, Cocosing. They are doing the clearing, the grading, and there's lots of grading, and the construction of the bridges. They are not, however, placing the subgrade nor the pavement nor the signs and other things that you need to get, a road open for business. So I question whether but that was actually a Facebook post in the Southeast Roads group today, and I'm skeptical of that, given how much work they still have left to do just under the current contract.
Well, it sounds to me that the work that you're describing that still has to be done, that might be under the 2021 deadline. We see all across West Virginia that they will blast and grade the right of way under a separate contract, and then come back.
That's right.
And then finish out the road in a forthcoming contract. So I wonder if that's what's going on here.
That seems to be West Virginia DOT's preferred practice. I'm not explaining why they do it that way, but they do.
Yeah.
Yep, we've seen it elsewhere with the Coalfield Expressway and the King Coal Expressway. So
right. Future US 121. That's exactly right.
Future I-73.
Oh yeah.
LOL.
That chance.
Yeah. So anyway, the roads that I was talking about, the back roads that you can get to the construction zones, they're off to the right as we go through here.
Yes, they are indeed.
Yeah. So if you're ever in the area and kind of want to get a sneak peek of the new alignment, you can do that. It's about a mile east of where we are right now. So this new segment is in the works. It's going to be completed in the next 2 to 3 years or so, I would say. And that'll bring the road from the current dead end that it's at in the Kearns area to a dead end point west of Parsons. So we're making great progress there. We'll talk about this more as we reach what will be the future north end of the expressway, but I'm under the impression that it's going to kind of have a feel like the way that the new Coalfields segment ends, where it's basically a driveway down to the road below. Kind of like a temporary ending or some kind of thing but I think so. I think I saw a picture, maybe it was Josh's picture, where the grade on that little driveway section there is like 11%.
It's like a 12% or something like that. It's absurdly steep.
Yeah, so I wonder I wonder if we're going to get the same kind of thing here. Of course, it's meant to be a temporary thing, quote unquote temporary, but they have to connect it to something at the end. So
my understanding is that West Virginia, they passed a bond issue, and that bond issue was going to allow for the temporary end that you described. I think will still be there, but that sooner rather than later, Corridor H will be extended to another temporary dead end at West Virginia 72 north of Parsons.
That would be
and that will happen sooner rather than later. I don't know where they're at on that. I don't know if that is they started clearing grubbing or that on that.
Yeah, so in July when I was filming this, I took a ride up 72, and they have started clearing that.
Okay.
So they seem to be moving relatively swiftly on that next piece that you're talking about. The ending at 72 would be a much more logical conclusion to this segment than the one that they're going to try to shoehorn in here. And I would assume that it would be much friendlier in terms of grades.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I think that there is some incentive to get the section get the whole expressway finished to Parsons, and then let's take a breath and see where we're at. Because I got to tell you, I'm sure we'll bring this up more as we head further east, but that expressway section from Parsons to Davis is going to be one heck of a chore to build. So
I agree with that.
And you can kind of see why. Like, as these sections of highway have been completed, you kind of can tell right away where the problem areas are going to be from an engineering perspective, right? Because they're the sections that have been skipped over.
They've blasted away a lot to LDI current sections, and the stuff that hasn't been built is even worse. So
I just picture it all as how much dynamite can you procure on a yearly basis. They'll build it all eventually.
Yeah,
we're coming up to this. Isn't real obvious here, but this is actually a mountain pass we're at, and this is also the border between Randolph County, West Virginia, and Tucker County, West Virginia. And you'll note that the road will start to go downhill somewhat, and we'll eventually come to this gigantic bridge over what will become old US 219, and also to the right of the way we're going now. Yeah, here's the county line sign right there. We will have a Haddix Run, Haddix Run. So this big bridge that's being built will span both Old 219 and Haddix Run, and that'll be a very high bridge. And Corridor H already has a fair amount of high bridges. I'm wondering if this might not be the highest one of the bunch, although there may be a pretty high one to get across the Blackwater River on that unfinished section between Parsons and Davis. That I suspect you could have pretty high bridges there too.
Yeah.
So if you go to the website, which is www.wvcorridorh.com, it actually has have maps of the planned sections and planned and built sections too of the Corridor H. I'll actually post up a link on the chat so people can basically follow along and get a picture of where Corridor H is going to be built in the sections that it hasn't been built in yet.
I want to circle back to engineering as far as the Parsons to Davis section is concerned. I know Pat was bringing up kind of what the parameters would have to be as far as the bridges that would have to be built. We're going to see here in a couple of minutes the high bridge that's in progress above the old highway, but I've long suspected that the Parsons to Davis section will require something even more special than that, what we're about to pass underneath. And I wonder, for a state like West Virginia, this might not be a popular opinion with you guys, but we have seen a bridge like the New River Gorge Bridge become a tourist attraction. And we will talk about that bridge when it comes time for a Corridor L's discussion. But I wonder if maybe, people want to see, activity in West Virginia, right? And I say to that, well, make something really special out of the Davis to Parsons section.
Yes. Well, and keep in mind also,
go big or go home.
Well, and keep in mind also in terms of engineering, and I'm not a civil engineer, I'm not a licensed engineer like Steve and Dan, but you also have the added mix in that a lot of Corridor H runs across National Forest Service land, which is not parkland, but it does have its own restrictions. But that section of Corridor H running over between Parsons and Davis will be running through at least part of Blackwater Falls State Park, which means Section 4F applies, which is a restriction. Here we're coming up to the bridge, and you can see the pier here, which is a seriously big pier.
Yeah, that's a couple 100 feet tall, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's a big boy. Yes, it is.
So yeah, like I look at what has to be done there, and I say, have a New River Gorge 2.0 or something, or build like a Malau Viaduct in the south of France kind of thing. If you're going to go to all the trouble to build this highway, and as we go through tonight, we'll get into a discussion about where we stand on that particular issue. But if you are going to go all in and say that this highway is necessary and we need to build it out to expressway standard and all of that, and you're also trying to make the point that we need to get people into West Virginia to help boost the economy and stuff like that, this area is devoid of tourist attractions. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, no, there are tourists. There is some tourists, and you have Canaan Valley State Park and Blackwater Falls State Park. Those are tourist attractions. Now, one of the intentions of Corridor H is to provide better road access to those attractions than we have today. It's a long way from any interstate highway to those attractions in Tucker County, and that will change with Corridor H. And I remember years ago now a discussion about this exact subject at a meeting of the Transportation Research Board. And one of the things that a then very senior member of the staff of the State Highway Administration in Maryland said, that the Appalachian Development Highway System is about inducing demand. In other words, about increasing traffic. Someone from Environmental Defense Fund, his eyes almost bulged out of his head. He was in the audience when he heard this, and he was jumping up and down, and the chairman told him to be quiet and sit down and that they'd get to him. But he went absolutely bananas to hear that from a state highway official. That is part of the reason for Corridor H.
But this is somebody from West Virginia?
The person who said that was from Maryland.
Oh.
But, they have the Appalachian Development Highway System corridors in Maryland, too.
I think it's worth noting that we're all coming at this from much more urbanized areas, where those are very bad words. Induced demand are curse words in urban and suburban areas. And in the Northeast, where pretty much all of us are from. But in an area like West Virginia that is dying to have a strawberry festival that attracts people from out of state and not just the locals. Inducing demand is exactly what they do.
Nothing. Yeah.
The other thing I mentioned about
when you have nothing.
I'll mention the piece of Corridor H that we just kind of passed by. That between 2017 and especially in 2018, the West Virginia environmental regulators issued the contractor Kokosing a stop work order for violating water quality rules, and I guess that's all been resolved now. But the work was stopped for a while on this entire project because of that, and I think it related to maybe inadequate stormwater management control. So I just share that.
Yeah,
Oh.
Pat, I was talking with you off the air about stop work orders and stuff like this.
Yes.
And obviously,
Yeah.
as we know, this is a very environmentally sensitive part of the country. And you can bet your bottom dollar that environmental regulators are watching every single move of this contractor, whether it is right or not to do so.
Correct.
That is what they are doing, and so. I'd be very interested to see some of the fly-on-the-wall discussions in these meeting rooms when it comes to environmental enforcement. As you know, I come through a heavy civil background, and I've had to deal with environmental BS of all kinds. I've been in my share of meetings as far as that's concerned, and I would love to know exactly what's going on in some of these meetings as far as that goes. We are coming up on Parsons now. What do we want to say about Parsons? Anything special?
Yeah,
Before we get to... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Kingsford Charcoal is on our right. Yeah, just past.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I was actually just about to mention that. It's actually the charcoal capital, West Virginia, I believe.
Yeah. This is where we're at now is the little tiny town, if you want to call it that. It's not incorporated, of Moore, West Virginia, Moore. I'm not sure if it's even big enough to have a post office, but we're just passing. We passed by Moore, and we'll be getting to Parsons here very soon. And Parsons, again, is the county seat of Tucker County, which is, I'm not sure if it's the smallest, but one of the smallest counties of West Virginia in terms of population.
Yeah, well, they're all small, aren't they? Or at least by West Virginia. West Virginia, most of the counties
The biggest, wealthiest county in West Virginia is Jefferson, which is the easternmost county of the state. That's where Harper's Ferry and Charlestown are.
Mm-hmm. Moore does not have a post office. We can move on now.
But Parsons has a post office and a West Virginia State Police station, too.
Somebody's got to mute their audio. Somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing.
It's us.
I had a feeling that was him. I didn't want to say something. I didn't want to call him out by name, but
I tried texting him, and I realized it's my own laziness. I could just have run upstairs and told him.
I won't run upstairs and tell him. I'll just text him and see if he hears me. Well, we appreciate
I
your...
will just click on his photo and click mute, which is the most effective.
I see that Parsons has the Golden Arches.
It does. This is where they used to have the sheets, right?
That is correct.
Yes.
The sheets used to be right next to the Golden Arches. That's correct.
Oh, so now
this is
downtown.
downtown. This is downtown Parsons right here.
Okay. We're going to have an interesting rail bridge coming up on the right.
That red sign there used to be a sheet sign, and it's now, I couldn't read, I don't remember the name, but...
BFS, it looks like.
Yes. And so that's the Parsons County offices were just in the building on our left there. And then, yes, we'll get to the Cheat River, which is known among whitewater enthusiasts. And yes, and there's the historic railroad bridge to the right.
Yeah, I got some pictures of that when I was coming through here. We passed the, I guess that's the county courthouse that was back there on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice little town, Parsons. Soon to be bypassed entirely by Corridor H, but it is here for the time being.
Oh, poor little Parsons.
As we
it's a cute town.
It is.
That will kill Parsons, probably.
Well, whatever's left of it.
It's going to kill the downtown. The only alive part is going to be right off the highway exit, and that'll be it.
All right, so let's. Do we want to get into this now?
Let's do it.
Let's get into
this.
Let's do it.
Wow.
We have some time before we reach Thomas and the start of the next expressway segment, and we kind of talked a little bit about or teased the what's necessary in the Parsons to Davis to Thomas section of highway. There's been it's interesting when you think about this highway. There are two real main camps of thought when it comes to this road, and you find that the road enthusiast community is unusually divided when it comes to Corridor H's construction, the need to build the highway that they're building in general, and the benefit that that would be displayed by even completing the highway. I kind of want to take some time to have you guys kind of bat this around roundtable style. I know that there are two different camps represented in this chat tonight. What do you guys want to talk about? Who wants to lead off? Why don't we give an overview of what the camps are, and then we'll go from there, right?
Sure.
So, I would say the pro-highway stance would be, the stated objective of the ADHS system, going back to the 60s when it was signed into federal law, was to promote economic development and activity in these underserved areas that are off of the interstate system. We have seen many ADHS corridors get built across the Appalachian region, stretching from Pennsylvania down through Alabama and Georgia. And, we might want to grade their success, one way or the other. But that is the objective. They have met with varying degrees of success in that regard, I would say. West Virginia in particular is an especially blighted state. I believe Sondor was mentioning off air that over a period of about 50 years, West Virginia is the only state that has averaged a net loss in population.
It is.
So there's that. The pro-highway argument is that this will increase development across the state and will open up new areas of the state to economic development and activity. I'm not even sure that this is the anti-highway argument. I'm not sure that these people necessarily are against the construction of the highway. It's just that they see this highway as a non-starter as far as really addressing the root causes of the problem in the state. Building a highway to bypass these communities that are already in trouble is only going to take further business away from those communities, and only help to really accelerate the decline of these areas from an economic standpoint. So why don't the two of you, why don't these two camps kind of reveal themselves and kind of take it from there? I think I gave it enough of an overview, right?
I'm a modified pro-highway.
Of course, there's a modified. Excuse me, I forgot to mention the modified version.
Basically, what I say is yes, the roads, like Corridor H, the corridor, it needs to be improved. It doesn't necessarily have to be 4-lane divided highway the entire stretch. You definitely, like a nice, at least 55-mile-an-hour highway, bypasses the towns, things like that. So basically, you can at least get, from point A to point B a little faster. You can have, your climbing lanes, basically so you can bypass trucks here and there as well. That's generally how I look at it.
Steve, if you're out there, I know that your opinion of Corridor H is more or less in harmony with mine, with subtle differences. I know you've been waiting about the last hour to get a bunch of stuff off your chest, so if you want to do it now's a good time to do it.
So I don't find that most of Corridor H is necessary. I think that the western stretch does have utility to it. Once you get to the parts that they haven't built yet, that sort of ends for me, and then nothing of what they've done to the east seems to be remotely useful. They're trying to create a corridor, and there's very little demand from Elkins east to Winchester, or whatever point you want to use, Strasburg. There's no demand there, and induced demand only works if there's latent demand that isn't served. There is no latent demand in this area. There's just nothing. So you don't build a highway without having some projected use for what's going to fill it up. As far out as Elkins, it's got some traffic. It gets people from 79 over to the 219 corridor, which is somewhat useful. It has worked, I think, somewhat. It's linked Buckhannon, it's linked Elkins to the broader highway network in a much better way than being on the 2 lanes of 219 and 250 is done for it. But east of there, it's going through nothing, and it's going to nothing. There's no reason to go from Thomas to anywhere. Thomas is a name on a map pretty much, and I don't want to insult anybody who lives in the town of Thomas, but there are 1,000 other towns like Thomas in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Appalachia in general. It's not deserving of a 4-lane highway. What I would have liked to see, first of all, throughout West Virginia is not taking away mountaintops to build highways. That's just outright ridiculous. You can make improvements to existing roads, as I think Doug just said, adding climbing lanes in appropriate places. You can do modifications that take off small pieces of mountainside to improve alignment. You don't have to wholesale destroy what they've been wholesale destroying to make the roads quite a bit more traversable than they are now. Get rid of a lot of the 10-mile-an-hour S-curves. Get it up to 35 or 40-mile-an-hour travel speed. Start with that. Start with something reasonable instead of blowing everything up because they're getting funded by unlimited coffers of our tax dollars or what have you.
Yeah, you notice how they went straight from the existing at-grade road like we're on right now to, boom, 4-lane, 65-mile-an-hour highway. Like, there was no middle step involved. Steve, I want to ask you about, the engineering side of things. Like, don't you think that if this road was being built in Europe, that there would be like 10 tunnels along it instead of like blowing away every mountain from here to the Atlantic Ocean? Don't you think that there would have been
Doug and I have both been to Iceland. I think we can vouch for the European approach that preserves scenery.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a completely different mindset, or it's a completely different mentality that people in West Virginia have as opposed to the European approach, which seems to be much more context sensitive, right? So I that's one thing that I was thinking about when I was driving this, was like, you blew away all these mountains and you didn't even make it interstate standard. Let's not forget the fact that West Virginia is half pregnant with this road. They're going to all the trouble to do this, but they won't go the full distance to make it interstate standard. But my point of view on that is very simply, look, if you're going to cause all this disruption and do everything that you're doing, slap an interstate on it. Don't do all this stuff, for decades and then not go anywhere with that. Anyway, that's one thing. That's one observation that I have, and I know that I interrupted Steve in the middle of his thought there, but I'll let him get back to what he had to say.
No, that was it.
And to bring the point back of basically what I was mentioning, that Steve was mentioning, like, hey, you can do 2 lanes, but modernize some of the alignments around curves. In West Virginia, you have a lot of roads that basically just kind of follow the contours of the ridges and what have you, and it makes driving in the state pretty slow. As I've been in every county in West Virginia, driven along some of these roads, and by gosh, some of these roads that you're on is basically, it's like like you're driving, all of a sudden you're like having to deal with all these curves, and it slows things down. So I think even having that better connectivity just between different towns within the state or different cities within the state would make things a lot probably easier for the people to basically get to their job site, or get home, or to the store, or what have you. Just makes things makes the driving aspect little little easier, I would say. I mean, they've done a great job with the corridors, but some of the more local roads that is, or some of the more minor state highways that can be an issue, which I think can be addressed as well.
Pat, defend your Corridor H, because I know that you've been a proponent of it over the years, and I want to make sure that you have the floor to kind of defend it. Because there is an argument. It's interesting. Within the road enthusiast community, there are these two different camps, and they both, I believe, have valid arguments to make. And we obviously, see this road through different eyes. And Pat, if you're out there, I don't know if we lost him again, but he has an interesting case to make as far as. Are you here? Okay, yeah. I was just gonna, I was just gonna give you the floor to kind of give us your take on it.
I want to follow up on the comment about the European engineering, and I've driven a lot in Europe and I'm familiar with. And the tunneling, I agree that you could do a lot of tunnels. I mean, Finland E18 in southwestern, that was upgraded to a motorway not that long ago. And there's a whole bunch of ridges. They're not the hard rock ridges like we have in Appalachia, but you have ridges that are left over from where the glaciers stopped. And they didn't blow those ridges away. They're not that big, but they went through them with tunnels instead. And so they cleared out the boulders and the sand and whatever else was in there. And so the road is, it's built to European motorway standards, E18, but it's nonetheless, it is context-sensitive design, and I wish we would do more of that in this country than we've been doing. And part of that is there's a tradition in many states. I won't mention any specifics of get it done as cheaply as you possibly can, and damn the consequences of same. Now, in terms of economic development, I'll offer this thought, and that is that the federal government is restricted in terms of what it can do to help states that are hurting, and West Virginia certainly qualifies in that. One of the things that the federal government can do is fund improvements to the highway network in terms of being, with the intention of inducing demand. One other thing, which I don't think we've mentioned, which is not in West Virginia, it's actually in Virginia near Front Royal, is the Virginia Inland Port. One of the things that will happen with a completed Corridor H is it will become much more attractive for trucks that now may be taking I-64 all the way to Hampton Roads to get to seaports. They'll be able to easily and quickly drive Corridor H to the inland port and unload there, and then ship ship the containers by railroad all the way from Front Royal to whatever terminal they're going to, and the reverse also holds true. So the Virginia Inland Port is a big player, I think, and hasn't gotten enough attention by Virginia.
Yeah. So can you give us a brief overview for those of you who aren't familiar, and I'm being one of those people? Like, what is the Virginia Inland Port exactly?
And I also just posted a link to the Virginia Inland Port website in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Virginia Inland Port is a large intermodal facility that was originally built by Virginia quite a few years ago, quite a few governors ago, with the specific intent of diverting cargo away from Baltimore and diverting it to Hampton Roads. It has since, I think, that has kind of been less of an issue. For one thing, Baltimore has been doing pretty well in terms of cargo, but it is nonetheless a way for trucks not to have to drive all the way from, the I-81 corridor, if you will, to Hampton Roads. And then there's also, the other thing that Baltimore is doing pretty well at is unrelated to this, but is cruise traffic. Now, the other thing in favor of Corridor H beyond that is that if you want to say get from the I-79 corridor to the Washington metropolitan area, and full disclosure, I work as a planner for the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Washington metro area, it's kind of a long drive if you're going to have all freeway. You're either going to take I-79 all the way up to I-68 and then come across that way. That's a lot of extra miles, whereas Corridor H to I-66, that will shave a lot of miles off that trip and that will induce traffic in terms of, induce truck traffic on a road where there isn't very much now. And trucks need services, and I think this road is good for that as well. One other thing is, and there was actually one of the participants at the Corridor H road meet a few years ago was a friend of mine who's retired from AAA Potomac, not always well loved by the environmental community, but a personal friend of mine. And he has retired to Hardy County, West Virginia, which is, I think, the easternmost county of Corridor H in West Virginia. And I think there's going to be more of that. Having Corridor H will induce more of that kind of development, which I think is overall a good thing. These are people that are retired, a little bit older than I am. I mean, I could retire. And by the way, we're making a right turn here into Thomas.
Yes, welcome to Thomas.
So those are some reason. Now, the other thing I want to mention about European is that Super 2 type roads, which I think is basically what we're talking about. The problem I have with Super 2 roads in the United States is most American drivers don't know how to drive on them. They are quite common. They are quite common in some European countries, and sometimes they have what's called a 2+1 Super 2, which means that one is 3 lanes of pavement, but they put a rigid barrier, either a Jersey wall type barrier, or sometimes it's a steel barrier, and it alternates sides so that you have passing zones pretty often when you have the 2 lanes by there, and when that lane ends, to give it to the other side, it's well signed and so forth. Some of you might be old enough to remember the 3-lane highways in Virginia, which were an abomination, and not Virginia, in Pennsylvania, including US 15, US 11 between Harrisburg and Shamokin Dam, which used to have a lot of crashes from people forgetting they were on a 3-lane road, and they thought that middle lane was theirs, and somebody else coming the other way thought it was their lane too. Yeah. So those are some issues that I have, why I think if you're going to build something like this in the United States, that it needs to be 4-lane divided. But I don't mean to in any way cast negative comments on what Doug and what Steve said, because I respect them and I think they know what they're talking about, perhaps more than I do. But those are some reasons why. The other thing is that Grant County, West Virginia, we're going to get to there pretty soon. They do have a new industrial park. I don't know how successful it's been, but they do have a industrial park. It's called Mountaintop Industrial Park, that is right across the road from where Dominion Virginia Power still has, I think it's its largest coal-fired electric generating station. And that station is probably going to be there for a while, because nobody around it complains, and it has railroad access and so forth. So I'll leave it at that, and certainly would welcome any any agreement or disagreement. Either way is fine. So we're getting close to making a left turn back onto the Expressway Corridor H now, and I'll show.
Yep. So
I want to throw out there because I want to throw out a real quick comment.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We passed in Thomas. I can vouch for the Purple Fiddle. Really great little, cafe, live music venue. I highly recommend. So, throwing that out there, and didn't want to interrupt CPZ.
Yeah, so in Thomas and Davis, there's also a number of waterfalls along the Blackwater River. The most well-known is Blackwater Falls, which is State Park. But a little bit furthermore on the Thomas end, there's Albert Falls and Douglas Falls. So if you like chasing waterfalls like me, this is a good area for that. Another thing too, this is also a pretty recreational area. I'm actually looking at Google Maps right now, and I'm noticing that there's a outdoor rock climbing park called the Tucker Boulder Park, and that's just off of Corridor H in Davis.
Alrighty then. Hey, look, we've turned onto a new road. Expressway ahead, folks, for the next 60 miles. This is the second continuous section of expressway that we will drive that is fully complete on the Corridor H alignment. It stretches from Davis to just west of Wardensville. It'll take us about an hour to traverse this section altogether. And for me, the real highlights of this drive are just ahead in the next half hour or so. My favorite overlooks on this drive are just ahead. But we've spent a few minutes talking about the pros and cons of Corridor H, and I would just offer up this question, that perhaps a rhetorical one. Did we have to go from the 2-lane roads that we had straight away to this? What we're seeing right now. Because throughout the country, you see some sort of a middle ground get built first. And then they say, well, this isn't really working. Maybe it works for a period of time. Maybe it works for a generation or so. And then we have to, do something else. But I found it very interesting that there was no middle ground here.
Regarding...
I just want to make this one point before I let you guys kind of take it from here. There is a sentiment within the road enthusiast community. I don't know if you guys want to hear this or not, but I'm going to say it, and perhaps you guys might want to run with this as well. But there's a sentiment within the community that is pro-highway to the extreme, where we say, we must have a new highway. Yes, I am pro-highway. Yes, I want a new highway. I don't care where it is, but I want a new highway. And then you ask people, why? Why do you want those new highways? And we say, well, because I want a new highway. They don't really have, the understanding of the parameters of the area. They don't really understand what we're dealing with. And I think where Steve and I are coming from is from a position of that very understanding of the parameters. A lot of people want new highways simply because they want to be able to go to meets, and they want these new highways, and they want to take pictures of them, and because they look nice and they fit well on their websites and all that stuff. That's it. That's all they really think about. They don't really think about the inner stuff that goes into these projects, and really what the ramifications of these projects are. And that's what's really important. It's not about hosting your cute little meets every few years, as far as road construction is concerned. It's about how we're improving access to different parts of our country and how we allocate those resources so that we may be able to access every part of our country in an efficient manner. I look at a project like Corridor H, and frankly, I'm disgusted by it. Not because it's not a nice highway, okay? I make all these points, and I say this with the disclaimer that as an engineer, I look at this highway and I marvel at it. It is, when it's completed, I really believe this, that we will look back and we will say that Corridor H is, east of the Mississippi, one of the finest highways that engineers have ever come up with. I really believe that. And I'm sure that if you're looking at it from that perspective, I find it hard to believe that you're not going to come to that same conclusion. Okay.
All correct points.
That said, I have serious doubts about using federal money for this project when at the same time we have leaky tunnels under the Hudson River. We have infrastructure in the Northeast in general that is far older than anything in West Virginia, because as we know, West Virginia got a late start to the party as far as connectivity. Our highways in New York City are falling apart. Our highways in many northeastern cities are falling apart. Ask me about highways that are falling apart in New York City. Okay? I work on one.
I'll
tell you all about it if you want. If you got 3 hours, I'll tell you all about it, okay? I see with Corridor H a serious misuse of federal money. I am all for connectivity, but with no disrespect intended towards the people of West Virginia, you are not the economic centroid of the United States. You never have been, and frankly, you never will be. And
Don't
we
forget-
need to start, and we need, I just want to make this point before I turn you guys loose. I want to see federal money spent in a manner that while it incorporates all 50 states, that we recognize where the economic centroids of our country are, and we treat those places accordingly.
Now I have to disagree with two people. I was originally going to disagree with a couple of CPZ's points about trying to build a corridor to locate new economic centers here. I don't think that just building a road is going to incentivize locating along it when the rest of the area is depressed, it's isolated, it's far from major centers. There's very little incentive for a company to move here, even with a tax benefit, even with cheap land, whatever it may be. It's still logistically difficult to connect that to the infrastructure. But at the same time, you owe it to America to give everyone a fair shake. And if you only invest in existing industrial centers, those will keep strengthening, minor ones will weaken and fall off, and no one who wants one will get one, which is the exact argument you can make about the poor versus the rich. So I'm not saying not to build the corridor. I think it should be contextualized, and I think you start with either two improved lanes like this, but only one carriageway, or you improve the roads that are out there as much as possible and get the spark going. And I don't think it's a misuse of federal funds to do that, but I think this is too much too soon without a purpose that's going to be fulfilled.
Steve, I agree with you. I'm not arguing with the context. Yeah, I didn't say that they shouldn't build nothing at all. In fact, I was the one who brought up the comment about the middle ground. The middle ground being the 2-lane improvements and all that stuff. And I said, I said this before, and I'll reiterate, that all 50 states, deserve to be represented at the table. There's no, I'm not saying to West Virginia to go F yourself. But we have to understand that, there is a difference here. You want to attract business. Well, is the only way to do that by building a 4-lane divided highway like the one we're on right now? I just don't agree with that. I don't.
I want to jump in because I agree with the middle ground factor.
Yeah.
And also, so I'm going to come at this with a different perspective, right? Because I'm a city planner. I'm currently a town planner. And, so I agree. Not only do I agree with the middle ground factor of why not and make improvements to the existing roads, but that's what these communities wanted. Ultimately, I mean, when I was looking back at the history of all this, what really struck me was that in 1995, when, there was debate over the routing, 4,000 people commented, and the overwhelming majority were against the highway. And I'm just blown away that 4,000 people commented. That is a huge amount of people.
Yeah. Considering that there are about considering that there are about 3,000 people.
If I could jump in here with the video, we just passed the Eastern Continental Divide, and we are now in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We have left the Ohio River watershed behind us.
Hooray! All right, so yeah, Laura makes the interesting point about local improvements to roads there. Yeah, and to kind of go back to what I said, somebody's making noise again. Somebody's got the mute button on their mic. Somebody's got to get that under control. Okay, thank you. We are treating this road, this development, as if it is part of the economic centroid of the country, instead of taking the middle ground, which is to say, hey, we know we got to improve access here and stuff like that, but, can't we meet in the middle first to kind of see what happens? I found, I just really, I know I've said this a lot already, and I'll probably say it again before the show ends, but I thought it was very curious that West Virginia got a hold of all this federal money, and they said, well, let's immediately build the divided highway. Instead of saying, instead of doing what I think a normal DOT would do, which would be let's make spot improvements, let's smoothen some grades and curves, let's add passing lanes here and there. Let's do some stuff here to kind of make things a little easier to travel. But they didn't want to do that. They kind of just skipped right over that step altogether,
Yeah, on that topic, I have a few points I'd like to make. First of all, there is nothing saying that the ADHS system must be 4-lane divided highways. I mean, there are ADHS corridors that are improved 2-lane roads that are more of the middle ground we are describing. Corridor F in Kentucky comes to mind. That's mostly a 2-lane road, has frequent passing lanes. They've smoothed out curves, smoothed out some grades, and it's generally a pleasant drive that is able to handle the amount of traffic it has without being overbuilt. I think something like that would have probably done just fine here on Corridor H.
Yeah, speaking of scenic view, we're passing by this wind farm up ahead. We're now entering what is easily my favorite stretch of the corridor.
Yeah.
Pat, do you want to? Well, actually, let's hold on to Pat's thought for a second, because I want to bring up the scenic overlook that we're about to pass in about a mile. I would say that this is probably one of the money shots of the whole corridor that we're coming up on here. If you get a chance to drive this, I highly recommend stopping here and taking a look around, because it's just fantastic. We're at the one ridge here, and you can see clear across to the next ridge. I believe this is known as the Greenland Gap. CPZ will correct me on that if I'm wrong. This is just a beautiful view. And I really, if you're going to drive this highway, this is one stretch that you really got to take note of. But go ahead.
This is actually what we're descending now is the front range of the Allegheny Mountains.
I knew I would get that wrong. Okay.
Yeah, and then the ridge that you can see off in the distance to the right here, that contains Greenland Gap, and I don't know if this is. I don't remember if this has a specific name, but the Greenland Gap is actually they realigned Corridor H. It has a bump in it that we'll see coming up to reduce the impact on Greenland Gap, because a lot of migrating birds use Greenland Gap as their own freeway to when they're migrating north and south.
Is that why so that's why that road has a kink in it?
That's why it has that bump there. Yes, so it's coming up. It is to reduce impact on Greenland Gap.
I was wondering why that was. Okay, yeah.
Well, a couple other things. One is that the funding traditionally for ADHS, so it hasn't been the case in recent years, has been a separate pot of money. It's not been the the federal service transportation program. And keeping in mind that the ADHS corridor was conceived by President Lyndon Johnson, and it was specifically about economic development and so forth to make the area of Appalachia. I mean, West Virginia is unique. It's the only one of the Appalachian states where all the counties are considered Appalachian counties. No other state has that many. But it was about economic development, and we can argue whether this will actually help economically these areas, and I don't know that we'll know that. I mean, capital projects like this take a long time to get planned. We certainly know that, and the benefits may not be obvious right away. Sometimes they're obvious instantly, but I don't think that's going to be the case here. So I'll just leave it at that for now. And but in a perfect world, I think a 2-lane Super 2 type road might not have been so bad, or an arterial road, maybe with with some of the busier at-grade intersections, spanned with bridges. But again, my concern there is I don't think Americans know how to drive on Super 2 type roads, and that bothers me.
Well, it is a different thing, yeah.
You know, Patrick, you bring up a really good point about this being an LBJ program, a President Johnson program.
Absolutely.
Is that this was very much tied into the war on poverty. And
very much is. That's correct.
So in some ways, this is tied into a lot. It obviously is meant for economic development, but it's also tied into other social programs that President Johnson, had in mind for really for poor white Americans in Appalachia.
Yeah.
And
I do want to mention. Oh, sorry. Go on, Patrick.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I do want to mention. I wanted to say this before when we were passing Bismarck. Something that I think has been lost in particularly this section of US 48 is how kinky West Virginia 93 was and still is between Bismarck and Rainey's playing her piano. But Bismarck and Cher, that it's the very, very kinky section through the gap. And
keep talking like this, Laura.
Huh?
Keep talking like this.
Okay, over the music. But it's very
not what I was referring to. I'll fill you in later.
Okay. But yeah, and again, did it need to be upgraded to a 4-lane highway? Is debatable, and I would say in most cases no. But a lot of areas where the road got completely replaced were. I think it's easy to look at, the part of US 219 that we drove on and said, oh, see, this was fine, without, thinking about the parts of West Virginia 93 that were completely eliminated with good purpose because of the fact that to get from one town to another was a huge slap.
Yeah, and circling back to the whole I was about to say something else. LBJ thing with his presidency, and really the theme of his presidency was the war on poverty. You're absolutely right in bringing that up, and it does make perfect sense that the concept of the ADHS system originates as sort of an offshoot leg of that. I got no issue with that. Connectivity is good. It's a good thing. I'm just looking at what we've got here, and I don't see it. And one other thing I want to mention, we brought up that West Virginia has been losing population for decades, and West Virginia has not been shy about building 4-lane highways. You look at since the 50s, there was the West Virginia Turnpike, which was, as we know, was built as a 2-lane road and then expanded later to 4. You have the interstate system that we see across West Virginia. You have the ADHS corridors, specifically L and G, and now H that's being built. None of those projects have alleviated the net loss in population of the state. And that is a long-term trend that can be studied and can be easily verified.
Absolutely correct.
So that kind of brings us back to the point of, and I kind of see this as a chicken or the egg kind of thing. Like, what comes first, the highway or the development? It sure doesn't look like the highway brings the development with it. At least not as far as West Virginia is concerned. Now, maybe in certain parts of the country, I've seen a lot of chatter for some reason about Houston in the live chat. A road like the Grand Parkway is being built because, frankly, that development is coming out that way in the Houston metro area. And so you need another, Houston is badass to the point where they need 3 beltways. So they're building that third loop well outside of Houston to accommodate that additional development. You don't see that development coming in West Virginia. All you really see, frankly, is people who can't wait to leave. And I just wonder if we are doing this the ass backwards way, whereas instead of building highways to promote development, or building highways to promote jobs, maybe we should be providing jobs to promote jobs.
A couple thoughts on that, and your points are fair. One is that the places in West Virginia that have done reasonably well economically there are 2 of them, and only 2, unfortunately. One is the Eastern Panhandle, which is effectively an exurb of Washington D.C. and maybe to some extent, especially Northern Virginia and maybe a little bit Baltimore, in Jefferson County and in Berkeley County. There's a fair amount of federal investment there. The Internal Revenue Service has its largest data processing center in Martinsburg, West Virginia, which is the county seat of Berkeley County. The other places along the I-79 corridor between Morgantown and, well, it doesn't quite go down to Weston, but I'll say that for lack of a better town to use as a southern terminus. And that is where the late Senator Byrd, who was very much a believer in economic development, especially if the federal government was helping to pay for it, was almost all of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's back office, their fingerprint cards, the clerical work that used to be done in downtown Washington, D.C., was moved to 2 large facilities along I-79, and that has really helped those areas out. So you have the 2. You have the in orbit of the Washington, Baltimore, and Northern Virginia area in the eastern part of West Virginia. And the most prosperous county in West Virginia is Jefferson County, the easternmost county. I'm repeating myself there. But the counties along I-79 have done reasonably well. You have the University of West Virginia, which is a pretty well-regarded institution of higher learning at the north end, and you have the FBI and some other activities there along I-79. And those places don't, quote, look like West Virginia, unquote, as compared to some of the really depressed areas, like, for example, along ADHS Corridor G, US 119 down south of Charleston down towards Pikeville, Kentucky, and some of those areas are hurting. Now, one of the things that's hurting West Virginia maybe more than anything else, and maybe they're going to come to realize that, no matter what happens, it's going to go away, is the coal industry. I mean, West Virginia has been extremely dependent on industry related to coal, and that's dying. I mean, there will be some electric generation using coal for a long time to come yet, but the amount of labor that's needed is going to eventually go to, I think, close to zero. And West Virginia, they've very much, been fervent believers in the coal business, and that's one of the reasons they've lost population is because the coal jobs have gone away. So, the extent that Corridor H, maybe will over time, help to make it more attractive. When one natural resource that West Virginia does have in abundance, you can see it along almost all of Corridor H, not all of it, but you can certainly see where we are now, is there are lots of trees. And a lot of those trees at some point are going to be harvested. And, they can be turned into charcoal, they could be turned into something else. That's a great natural resource. Not for nothing, there's one Nordic country that calls their trees their green gold because it's made millionaires and even billionaires out of industries related to forestry and so forth. So I'll shut up at that and let someone else talk.
Well, no, I think the points you bring up are fair. The thing that I want to ask, I'll ask you a crazy question. All right, Amazon has been in the news not so long ago. They were talking about building a new big headquarters somewhere. I'm sure you've heard of that. Here's a crazy idea. What if they moved to Charleston? Don't you think that would be a much bigger boon for the state of West Virginia than this, with all due respect, It's a dead-end highway without any development along it. Don't you
I
think
agree.
that would be... Yeah, so this is kind of my overarching point here that, you know, I want the jobs. Give me jobs, man. Like, you know, yeah, I'm kind of saying this in the tone of the late owner of the Oakland Raiders, Al Davis, you know, when he said, just win, baby. You know, just get jobs, baby. You know, worry about the roads once you have the jobs. You know,
that unfortunately, that's not. I don't know if that's that great of an approach either, because what happens then, you get the population with the jobs, and with that comes a certain number of people that join the Sierra Club and, you know, oppose all you know, in some cases all transportation improvements, be they highways or other things. In some cases they oppose only highways, but you know, we just had a very large cost overrun on a light rail project in my state of Maryland that was in large part due to NIMBY lawsuits that were filed against the project. And so you have that. Now, one other thing about jobs that comes with most jobs that we call, quote, good jobs, unquote, is school systems. And I don't think that West Virginia is unique in this, but West Virginia school systems are not considered to be all that good. And so I don't know that you could get an Amazon. And I mean, you know, Amazon wanted to be, you know, they had a workforce, I guess it wanted to be near transit. So Arlington County, Virginia was a pretty good place. They have the Washington Metro there, which, by the way, the one definitive book about the Washington Metro I'll add is entitled The Great Society Subway. So it was also about some of the Great Society goals, even though that was a very large transit project and not a highway project. But so I think that schools are an issue, and I don't know that West Virginia, I mean, there's a lot of people in West Virginia, their own citizens, that absolutely the idea of spending more money on schools is met with rage. I mean, I've heard that from people, friends of mine who live in West Virginia, and at least one person who I think several members of this chat know personally, and have, you know, has talked about things like this. Yeah. So there is that reality as well. So I'm not saying, and I don't know, and the federal government in this country traditionally has not been in the business of helping to do significant improvements to local school districts. So there's, and then as Eileen just told me, and she's right, especially when you had someone like the previous Secretary of Education in charge, who has now departed and gone back to Amway, I guess. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. But so there's some more. You know, that and $1.50 can get you a cup of coffee at Sheets, and we're coming up on the Sheets at Moorfield pretty soon.
All right, yeah. Well, before we go any further with this discussion, because I know there are a lot of different arms to this that we could go into, and I'm sure that people have more that they want to get off their chest. But we just passed another one of my favorite scenic overlooks on the whole highway, where we had that, you know, that runaway truck ramp that looks like something that Evel Knievel could use to jump the valley. And then we had that sweeping panoramic curve to the right. That's right up there too. I would put that on the podium of favorite Corridor H views along the whole length. But I will, as we approach Mooresfield, as CPZ has alluded to, I will let more people chime in if they would like to. I've really enjoyed the candidness of this exchange that we've had the last probably hour or so. But if more people want to chime in or, you know, follow up on stuff, feel free.
Sure, I'll jump in real fast again. You know, it's interesting because I hold a really weird conflicted view in this hobby. You know, the longer that I work as a urban and town planner, the more that I start to wonder if some of our great highway experiments have been a mistake. And not, you know, and most of the chatter in that regard has been mostly with urban highways. And, you know, understandably so, that a lot of urban highways were used under the guise of slum clearance and racism, which ultimately destroyed neighborhoods and parts of cities that never recovered. And as we're, you know, going through and talking about this, part of me wonders if, you know, one day, you know, some of these rural highways are going to be, you know, if they're not already, you know, a mistake in that the promises, the things that we thought, you know, or that planners or whoever thought at the time that the grand visions of economic development aren't going to come to, fruition. And of course, it's a very different conversation, but there's similar, there's some similar ribbons of commonality, I think, between the two. Are these ribbons of highway, are they worth it, or is it something that we're ultimately going to completely, come back and say this 20th and 21st century experiment was a failure?
Yeah, Laura, it's so interesting that you say that. And if this was not, the COVID era, and if you were here in person, I would want to run up to you and give you a hug, because the engineer in me, really feels very similar. Joining this hobby and realizing that I was a part of this hobby, I like roads, right? I like to drive places, and I like to, see roads, and I like to see bridges and all that stuff. Well, the professional that we are, collectively, we get down to studying these projects. And when you study urban projects, I mean, my God, New York City is, just a study in itself of slum clearance and all that other stuff that you were mentioning. And then you talk about the ADHS system, and the fact remains, and it must be said, I know that a lot of people in the hobby don't want to hear this, but the promises these highways were meant to fulfill have not been fulfilled. Whether that is in the urban sense or whether it is in the ADHS rural sense. I don't think that every rural highway will ever come under this scrutiny, but I do think that the projects that are of this generation, the Corridor H's, the Corridor Q's of the world, I really think we're going to be sitting here studying those a few decades from now. Much like we're studying the slum clearances of Baltimore and New York City 50 years later. And it's really, at times, it's uncomfortable for me. And at times I feel out of place in the own hobby that I claim to be a member of. Because I have the wherewithal, and I'm not trying to put down people who don't do this, but, I have the wherewithal to study this stuff and really kind of understand the history and the significance and the real honest after effects of these projects.
I just want to break in real quick and vouch to our viewers that hugging Laura is something everyone should do.
I agree. Listen,
yes.
Laura is probably...
Oh, all the hugs for all of you, especially for Dan when I see you again. Post-COVID.
Can't wait. But yeah, I have gotten this sense since I have become more, for lack of a better term, literate in the history and the after effects of these projects, that I am more and more at odds with the hobby that I claim to love. And I don't know, maybe that's just me. I suspect that there are more people than me who feel that way. But it is interesting to see how my opinion has changed in as little as 10 years. I don't know. Somebody run with that.
Yeah, well, I also want to just make a point, or just mention that I am seeing a lot of positive discussion in the live chat about, basically development versus or things that can be done, within the towns a Corridor H passes through.
Yeah, I think these are very important discussions that we have to have. It's not... we can't build 4-lane divided highways and fix all the problems in our country. We can build them, sure, but are they going to really fix all of our problems? And are they really going to give us the long-term benefits we desire? And I think those are real questions that, for whatever you want to say.
Allow me to answer that. Your last statement.
Yeah, go ahead.
In urbanized areas like the one where I work in, we have the opposite problem. We have highways where they are oversubscribed, and we don't have the money to maintain them, and we don't have the money to expand them either. And one of the things that I've come around to, and this is my own opinion, not my employer's opinion, although I did arrive at it in part from having worked in this field for a long time, especially things like congestion management and systems performance. I'm not a real engineer, unlike some of the other esteemed members of the group, is that we should be all of the chronically congested freeways, and I'm using now the engineer's term, not the West Virginia term for freeway. I think every centimeter of them that is congested should be tolled. We have the ability to do that at relatively low cost, and it should be tolled with an idea to maintaining free flow unless there is incidents. That would generate a lot of revenue. It would also generate a lot of fury, and there's a lot of people, I'm sure, that would not be happy with that for various reasons that you're probably acquainted with. I don't need to bore you with that. But that's something that I feel that we're failing as a professional, that we're failing the country at, and that we're not, yes, we're building new managed lanes, and I don't have a problem with that. But my own opinion is that we should be charging money on all the lanes, and that money should not be shouldn't be Pennsylvania Turnpike type, or even Highway 407 type tolls, but that they probably need to be higher during rush hour. I mean, the freeway near my home that you've all heard me talk about, one of the reasons it's been successful is that even though it's not dynamic tolling, it's static tolling, it charges significantly higher tolls during peak demand times. And unless there's a crash or something like that go on, the road is never congested. And so if we're talking about success or failure of highway projects, it's not a question of being empty in metropolitan areas, but it is a question of not managing them properly. And I think the only way to manage them that works in this country is with tolls, and ideally, time of day tolling, so that in the 2 o'clock hour you pay a lot less toll than you do at, say, 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah. I also want to say that we had just passed the Clifford Hollow Bridge, which is one of my more scenic, the parts of Corridor H, which I find which is most scenic.
Yeah, that was a stop on the Corridor H meet, wasn't it? I think.
I believe it was. Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, I've seen that bridge pop up.
Yeah, I remember stopping there.
Yeah, I posted a picture of that bridge on Instagram and Facebook a few days ago.
Yeah, oh, that's right. That I did see that. Okay. Well, I guess we're not that far from Wardensville now, and I just want to take a second to let folks know who maybe have joined us late or have been with us, at some point since the beginning of the show tonight, that we're being joined by Pat from Maryland, Laura and Mike from mdroads.com. We've got Steve from alpsroads.net here somewhere, unless he's passed out. We've got Josh from...
As usual.
Yeah, okay. We got Josh here from Bill's Mafia, repping Bill's Mafia. We've got Doug from the Gribble Nation Empire as well, and all of you in the live chat. It's been great to have you with us. I've really appreciated the lively chat that we've had the last hour plus on this highway.
And if you like what you've seen on the video, make sure you give it a like.
Yes, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Or if you absolutely hate my anti-Corridor H standpoint on a number of issues, feel free to dislike this video too. That works. I
know where he lives.
Well, Doug knows where I live. That's right. A few of you do. So we continue to roll east on the expressway towards Wardensville. I promised Doug we would spend a couple of minutes on Gribble Nation podcast episodes while we have a bit of a lull here. Doug, what do you have cooking right now?
I have a few things cooking. What I'm probably going to do, because January is a busy month, I'm probably going to do a month in review type of episode. I'm also looking at doing something with Massachusetts, including the Massachusetts exit renumbering project that's going on.
Oh boy!
And I'm also developing a podcast where I bring in the Historic Route 20 Association founder and president Brian Farr, talk a little about US 20.
Oh, Brian's coming on. That's cool.
I talked about that actually earlier in the week, and we got to figure something out. And also probably something coming up about the state of Maine. I did, just have an episode about Oregon, so we're humming along. I'm update-wise, I just posted something about US 6 in Utah and the Wakefield Covered Bridge in Quebec, and I'm working on something on the Cherahalla Skyway in North Carolina and Tennessee.
Yeah, on the blog front from my end, I wrote a bunch of posts a few weeks ago, and then I scheduled them to go live once a week on Friday. So I don't even remember what the heck I've got coming up right now. But I think I did. You know what? I just did a West Virginia related post the other day.
On River Gorge?
Yeah. Because Adam posted about the national park designation for that. And so I decided to kind of follow up on that and use that as an excuse to share some of my pictures of the New River Gorge area from July of last year. So that's on the blog right now.
I might be posting something about that later in the winter as well from my own visit.
Oh, that's right. You're heading down there.
And I also posted the link to Dan's New River Gorge post in the live chat.
Yeah, so there's that, and then I've got a few other things lined up. There's another Lighthouse post coming soon. There's a post on some Delaware landmarks named for our current president. In fact, I just did a podcast episode, or I released one that was devoted to those, plus our favorite toll plaza on the eastern seaboard. I spend a few minutes talking about the Newark Toll Plaza on the Delaware Turnpike. So there's that episode that's on the podcast now. You can go check it out. I think I mentioned at the top briefly that there will be a very unique take on the Super Bowl preview show coming out next week. I've also got some other stuff in the works, too, on the podcast front. I've got an episode on the I-95 project in Wilmington, Delaware that's about to kick off. And I am kind of dreading doing this episode, but we have an episode lined up for the DC Interstate system and how they are going to renumber some of the freeways downtown. Not the exit numbers, the actual route numbers. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure. And there's some other stuff down the line too, as far as the blog is concerned. I got a series on railroad bridges that'll be coming out next month. So you all have that to look forward to. Plus, Adam, I'm sure, is cooking up something. I'm sure Tom is always working on something as far as either old US 99 or old US 101, something like that.
Yeah. He got basically a bunch of books from the California Highways and Public Works that were published, basically decades ago, and he can basically have an updating spree from the information from that.
Yeah. Where are we? Are we approaching Wardensville yet?
And we're getting there.
Okay.
Yes, we are approaching Wardensville.
Okay. Do we want to talk about the Wardensville bypass yet, or do we want to wait for a few minutes?
I want to ask a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For CPZ, when is the Corridor H 2 meet happening?
The sequel.
The sequel. I would like for the sequel to happen, maybe, and this may be a little bit long in the future, when the whole enchilada is open from I-81 to I-79.
Yeah,
now there might be need.
We'll all be dead.
I'm already eligible to retire from my job currently, so I may be kind of old by the time that happens, or may not even be around. But perhaps when the I think at some point, especially if the groundbreaking happens sooner rather than later, I think the section between Parsons and Thomas Davis will be very interesting. And to the extent that there may be possibility to see some of the construction going on there, I echo what Dan was saying earlier about that section needs to be, almost have like a New River Gorge Bridge type of, section to it, which should be very interesting. So
I'm just saying, West Virginia, if you're out there and if you're listening, make something special out of that Parsons to Davis section that'll be unforgettable, whether it be reminiscent of the south of France or, Fayetteville on the New River.
Right.
Do something with that.
Yeah. I wonder what will be finished first, Corridor H or the I-86 improvements.
Ooh, yeah. Well, that we might want to start a pool on that. You get some bets on both sides, I think.
Yeah. Actually, my money's on Corridor H.
I don't disagree with you.
It's that Hale Eddy to Hancock section.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, will Corridor H finish before Rainey graduates from high school?
No.
That's
only 17 years from now. That's not long at all.
It's really not.
No. They might be starting on the section in Virginia by the time she's in high school or out of high school.
Yeah.
Speaking of that section in Virginia, they've taken a similar approach with Corridor H as they've taken with I-73 and the Coalfields Expressway. In that Virginia will start thinking about it when it is complete to the state line. So I don't expect anything to be built in Virginia anytime soon. I mean, we're probably talking 20, 30 years if it happens at all.
Yeah, I want to pause that thought that Josh made because it's an interesting point. But we're reaching there were 2 mandatory truck stops along this section of highway. We passed one a few miles ago, and here's the next one up ahead. And as we round this curve, you will notice, there's a freeway ends sign up ahead. You know what that means? That means that the freeway ends, in case you didn't know that.
So there will be cross streets?
I'm not sure. We're going to have to watch the video to find out. I'm not sure what happens up ahead. Maybe, because the earth is flat, we're just going to drop off the edge, Yep. Maybe that's going to
happen. Well, cats would have pushed everything off if the earth was flat.
But, maybe there's like a spot at the end of the earth where it's just populated with cats.
Pushing things off.
Yeah.
That's my house.
Steve lives at the end of the world, folks, in case you're wondering. This is a nice view.
Steve is a cat, so...
Yeah, as we descend into Wardensville, here's the end of the expressway. You'll see the nice graded stub on the right as we return back to at-grade territory here. This is where the Wardensville bypass would jump off from and continue east towards the Virginia state line. So as we get ready to pass through Wardensville, let's resume what Josh was saying about, this eastern end of Corridor H from here to I-81. It seems to me like this is going to be the last piece to be built. I don't think that's an unreasonable take to have.
Not at all.
So where do we stand on let's refresh, because I think we mentioned this a couple hours ago, but where do we stand right now on the Wardensville section?
I don't think they've even started talking about it. So
no, it's either preliminary or it's either in preliminary engineering or might even be in final engineering. It's a long. They're doing work. I've seen drawings which would imply preliminary engineering and possibly final engineering, but
I just linked to the Corridor H website that West Virginia has. It says that the section between Wardensville and the Virginia state line, final design of the segment through Hardee County is anticipated to begin in 2020, and construction is tentatively scheduled to begin in 2027.
Okay, so we may have an expressway to the state line in 2035 or so.
Yeah, of course, that part of the website was looks like it might have been updated in 2019, actually.
So Lorraine might have an expressway to the state line to celebrate while she's in high school.
Right, they could graduate together.
All right, yay!
Woo, 2037.
She can make out with her. Never mind.
Ew, no.
So as we enter the town of Wardensville, so this is probably... Is the timeline on this that the Wardensville piece is the last section in West Virginia that will be built? Is that where we're at?
No, I think the portion between Parsons and
Davis
is.
Is that
the final design basically between Parsons and Davis is anticipated to begin in 2025, and construction in that section is scheduled to begin in 2031. So if West Virginia is listening, they should be going back and listening to Dan's comments a few times about that section.
I mean, they've got the designs for the New River Gorge in their archives, so...
Yep.
You know...
Which,
or just get on the phone. Yeah, get on the phone with France or somebody else out in Europe who knows how to.
Which strikes me a lot like that design of the bridge in Twin Falls, Idaho.
That is true. Yeah, Twin Falls is another good example. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people that West Virginia can get on the phone with who know how to design roads better than we do. So, yeah, so folks, the long-term outlook on Corridor H is you're not going to see a whole heck of a lot change in the next, 15 years or so? We've reached a point now where we're stuck, and we are engineering our way towards building the next big sections of the highway, but do not expect anything imminent as far as new mileage, well, other than the section between Kearns and Moore. In the next decade and a half or so. This is going to be.
It's also it's also based on federal funding, and if more federal funding becomes available, well, then the timeline will presumably be moved up. That's my understanding.
Yeah, but so that's another wild card involved here, right? Is as we mentioned, the ADHS system is a federally funded program, so if there was ever to be an influx in funding. That would influence the timeline. If there was to be a reduction in funding, that would influence the timeline. So we're kind of making these guesses in the timeline based on the funding that's currently available. But there's no way to know for sure how the funding is going to line up until we're making our way through those years in the present tense.
But it is probably not an unreasonable assumption that funding will be increased, but you don't know exactly how it'll be impacted or how it'll impact the timeline at all. So,
it's impossible to know that at this point. Yeah. Really, we're just working with possibilities rather than probabilities. So, we just kind of have to work with what we've got, and we know that engineers are at work with the sections that they have in front of them, and we'll just see how that plays out in the coming years. As we traverse this at-grade section, as we approach Virginia and then pass through Virginia, I want to give the floor to my esteemed colleagues in the live chat. I know we've covered a lot of ground tonight. We've covered a variety of different subjects, and we've had some really lively discussion at times. I want to make sure that everybody has the floor before we sign off to kind of get off whatever they want. Because I don't know if our discussion earlier about the need for Corridor H was fully completed or not, but if it wasn't, there's time for folks to make additional comments or
Let let me offer one comment about that. Right, this relevant to this section of road. I've had a couple of times, and I've been up this way, had the misfortune of being going in this direction. In other words, eastbound on what is now Route 55/Route 48, and been behind one or more laden commercial vehicles. And this is steep enough, and both in West Virginia, more in West Virginia, but also in Virginia, that by the time that you get to I-81, where Corridor H is planned to have its eastern terminus, if looking in the mirror, there would sometimes be 50 or 100 cars queued up behind it, especially, on a holiday, not maybe during the week, but on a non-work day, the traffic backs up behind such a vehicle very quickly. And I just wanted to share that thought. Now, would that problem be solved with climbing lanes here? Quite possibly the answer is yes. So I'm not, I can't say, oh, well, for that reason you have to go Corridor H, but I will say that for that reason that the existing road is rather inadequate if you're behind, a lot of heavily laden trucks here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, you've been awfully quiet lately.
I said my piece before.
You don't? Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't prevent you from saying other things that you had on your mind.
Yeah, my opinion on this section is similar to sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, Doug. I did just want to note that the Virginia portion, people have said that that's going to make a difference in the utilization of Corridor H, and I can see some of the argument there that Virginia's got to be on board with this for it to ever be useful. West Virginia can be fully completed all the way to the eastern border, and if you're still on whatever's left of the road from there into Strasburg and it's not fully up to the same grade, it's not going to get the utilization.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of this too. Like, you look at the map of Corridor H, and the east end of it is within a stone's throw of I-66, which would take you into DC Metro. The thing to remember here is that requires Virginia to be on board with this whole project, which to this point they haven't really expressed much interest in it. Now, of course, that could change. That isn't. It's not out of the question that they will become interested in it if they have an entire expressway corridor right up to their doorstep. But yeah, the Virginia factor here is something that needs to be mentioned. I agree.
Yep. And I'd like to bring up a similar example to that, which is also at the state line between West Virginia and Virginia. If you look at Route 9, in West Virginia, basically east of, so I believe it's east of Martinsburg. It's a fairly modern highway. And then when you get to the state line, basically the improvements kind of peter out because I don't think Virginia, has quite as much utility for their part of Route 9 as West Virginia does, east of Charlestown, actually.
Speaking of Virginia, here's this Virginia state line at the top of the hill. By the way, in case you weren't aware, Virginia is for lovers. It's for lovers of roads, too. Unless you're a lover of Corridor H, in which case there's no love for Corridor H in Virginia right now. Anyway.
Actually, Virginia is against tyrants. Sic semper tyrannis.
Is that the state motto?
Yes, thus always a tyrant. If you look on a marked state police car in Virginia, and you'll see that is slain the tyrant.
Are they saying that everyone who drives recklessly in Virginia is a tyrant? I don't know. I guess
Jefferson. You need to check with Tom Jefferson on that.
Well, I don't know who that is, so you have to help me out with that one. Well, we know that Virginia, they love to pull people over for reckless driving and lock them in the hoosgow. But, do they? My point was, I guess nobody understood my point. Whatever, about Tyrants equal reckless driving, but whatever. I'll just let that go.
Yes,
anyway,
right.
I'll forget about that embarrassing moment, and let's move on because now we're in Virginia.
I did just as a public service. I did just check the VDOT 6-year program website, which is a pretty good site for those that are interested in what's planned in the next 6 years in Virginia, in both Shenandoah County and in Frederick County, where are the two counties through which Corridor H would run. And there is no funding in the 6-year program for either county at this time for anything that looks like Corridor H, not even for preliminary engineering.
Pat, what is Virginia's priority right now as far as ADHS corridors are concerned?
I think it's the ones in far southwest. Keep in mind that Shenandoah and Frederick counties are not even in the Appalachian, they're not even in the ADHS region, but because Corridor H, has to go through to Virginia to get to I-81, I think they can still fund this with ADHS, but it's projects like Corridor Q, for those of us that might have been at the Pikeville, Kentucky meet, we went to that really high bridge that was just inside Virginia. The counties that are in the ADHS footprint, almost all of which are in far southwest Virginia, that is VDOT's priority at this point for ADHS. Now, if that changes, especially if the federal funding changes, and all of a sudden they're told, they get a letter from Washington saying, well, you can now use 100% federal money to build Corridor H. Well, they might be singing a little different tune at that point because they wouldn't have to put any of their state money in it. So that's speculative on my part, though.
So Corridor Q is the big item in Virginia.
I think Corridor Q and probably, is it King Coal or Coalfields, the Virginia part of US 121 or what would become US 121. I think those are the Virginia priorities in terms of Appalachian Development Highway System.
Coalfields is very low priority in Virginia, I think. I mean, I think that's on a similar level to Corridor H.
At least H is mostly completed.
Well, I get the feeling with Coalfields that they're working their way from north to south.
Yes.
So West Virginia still has a lot to build.
And West Virginia isn't even close to the state line yet, so...
Right. So I just wonder how quickly Virginia is going to move on Coalfields if West Virginia still has so much of their part to build. That's a personal opinion. I don't know the ins and outs of that project necessarily, but
no, you're correct.
As a general observant of that, I wonder if that's kind of where we're going.
Yeah, that's generally how Virginia acts. I mean, we've seen that with I-73. We've seen that with Corridor H. We'll probably see it other times. So.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia has been very proactive with Corridor Q, I would say, but outside of that, they're not in a big hurry to do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, outside of that, the roads don't provide a huge utility to Virginia itself.
Don't forget.
Yeah, and I just want to make a quick point about Virginia and the investment, in highways and stuff like that overall. You're seeing quite a bit of investment in Hampton Roads recently.
Yes.
And that's probably going to be the subject of a future webinar, I'm sure, the roads of Hampton Roads. With the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, the new high-rise bridge on 64. Projects like that have been badly needed for decades, those are finally being addressed.
Yeah.
There's also, the Richmond and D.C. metros have gotten a lot of funding over the years, and those are obviously the big population centers of the state. So you can understand where, their focus from a Virginia standpoint would be on those parts of the state. Again, not trying to say that the parts of southwestern Virginia where Coalfields is going to run are useless, but you can understand why, Virginia would be moving slowly on stuff like Coalfields and Corridor H when they've got, their hands full with stuff further east. But yeah, I guess we should spend a minute real quick on Corridor H and interstate designations. Who can tell me definitively whether or not Corridor H has ever been considered for interstate designation?
No, never.
I mean, it wasn't that part of the I mean, isn't it linked to the I-66 Kentucky stuff?
Well,
No.
Everybody makes the connection with I-66 because 66 begins a short distance to the north along I-81.
Yeah, I mean,
but I don't think
it
that's
became
ever
this-
been...
It was never, that was definitively never connected. The 66 proposal in Kentucky was different. First of all, they didn't have a defined route towards the east, but the thought was it's going to hit 81 somewhere else. That Corridor H has never been officially in any discussion for any interstate designation whatsoever.
Except on the AA Roads forum in the fictional highways page.
There you go.
Yep, there we go.
I agree. Steve is absolutely correct. I absolutely agree with Steve on that. There's never been any serious talk about interstate designation for Corridor H.
That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be useful at some point, but it's just never been something that West Virginia and the federal government has ever wanted to pursue. Kind of similar to what you're seeing along US 52 in West Virginia. Yes, I-73 and I-74 are written into federal law along what is eventually, 200 years from now, going to be the King Coal Highway. It's just not something that's on West Virginia's radar. Plain and simple.
Yeah, West Virginia generally isn't that interested in building interstate grade highways. They are perfectly happy with at-grade, expressway grade.
Yeah, because they can call them freeways anyway.
Yeah, I would agree that there really isn't much use for a full freeway grade facility, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Corridor H gets completed as a, expressway grade facility and Laura's daughter Lorraine is there at, to cut the ribbon on her high school graduation day and it works as a 4-lane expressway, that's good enough, right? I mean, you're not going to see a lot of clamoring for an interstate designation, mainly because it's just not necessary. I mean, if you look at the interstate highway grid in the region, you've got 68 to the north and you've got 64 to the south. I mean, you can reach West Virginia already on a relatively adequate basis from the DC Metro with the interstates that are already in place. From that perspective, I just say that there's not really going to be any clamoring for a westward extension of I-66 to West Virginia. Forget about the westward extension of I-66 to Kansas. But, that again, that's for fictional highways on aaroads.com forum. If you want to go check that out over there and have a blast, feel free. But anyway. We're in the last few miles of our trip. We've almost reached the town of Strasburg. We started our journey over 2 hours ago, and I really want to thank everybody who has been with us the entire time, or even just for a part of it. I know all the people on my Skype feed right now have had to put up with me for the last 2+ hours, so I really appreciate them doing this as well. Anything interesting that we want to say about I-81 in Virginia as we approach the east end of Corridor H here?
Needs more lanes, but they had the debate about adding an entire truck roadway to it that was going to be tolled, and that never happened. Then that came down to widening to 3 lanes, and then that came down to only in certain spots.
Yeah,
the latest on 81 is that the Commonwealth of Virginia has established a bunch of special taxing areas, which I think cover all, whatever it is, 313 miles of I-81 in Virginia, and that they will be making assorted improvements. In some cases, there'll be bridge replacements. Other cases, interchange modifications. And yes, in some cases, they will be widening the road. It certainly should be 6 lanes all the way from Winchester to the Tennessee border. I think there's no question about that. But is that going to happen? Will that happen by the time Rainey's ready to graduate from high school? Maybe not. Maybe she will go to a certain major engineering school in Massachusetts. We have a member in our group here from, and earn a PhD in civil engineering. And maybe by the time she gets her PhD from that school in Massachusetts, maybe then it'll be 6 lanes all the way across. But I'm being optimistic.
Yeah. Well, let me know when that happens, because that's going to be the year when she comes to take all of our jobs.
That probably is true.
She'll be building the next signature bridge in the Northeast, and she'll be designing the next superhighway somewhere.
I will be happy to retire if she's taking the reins.
Listen, I just hope I'm retired by the time she enters the workforce, because the first thing she's going to do is come from my job.
Who knows? She could be building those autonomous vehicle superhighways.
Well, that is. Yeah.
Maybe that's what the 3rd lane on I-81 will become.
Maybe. Yeah. Or she'll be replacing my bridge. I don't know.
Hopefully your bridge isn't being replaced that quickly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to do the math here, so let's see. Well, maybe
towards
global
the warming,
end of,
Doug.
Maybe at the end of her career. But then again, that's kind of cutting it a little short too. I hope not by that point. I hope I'm long dead by the time that has to happen. But
maybe by then we can teleport to places.
I have in light of what Dan just said, a colleague of mine who is now retired, who was pretty good at doing travel demand forecasting work. He's well respected in the field. He said, "Yeah, when the out year of you want this to happen by the time the out year of your forecasts arrive, when everything's supposed to be finished and open and done, you want to be retired or dead or both."
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great line from a very bright fellow. He worked for VDOT. He left us and he went to work at VDOT for quite a few years, but he's now completely retired. But very, very smart guy in terms of models developing, and knew what he was doing. This is the guy that earned a lot of money from buying defaulted Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel bonds back in the 1960s, because he knew that the traffic would recover sufficiently to start paying principal and interest on those bonds again. They were in default, and when they did, he got a very large capital gain from selling those bonds at basically face value, where he'd bought them at a very steep discount. So, Enough of that.
Yeah. I had my fun, on the Hudson River there, and I hope I don't have to go back there for a long time, if not ever. So, I moved on to something else, and that's what engineers do. They have projects that keep them busy for a couple of years. In my case, that project was 6 years. And we just move on to the next thing. There's always the next project with us.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know Steve can vouch for this as well. Like, Steve has worked on projects for a couple years at a time, and he's, whatever the project might be, there always comes a time when the project ends, and you get on to the next thing. But I just want to make mention that we have now, as we reach I-81 here in Strasburg, Virginia, we have reached the eastern terminus of ADHS Corridor H. And if you have watched this video, all 2.5 hours of it, you deserve a round of applause. So thank you very much, everybody. We reached the east end. Hooray!
Yay!
Woohoo!
Thank you all very much.
Yippee Skippy!
Thank you all very much for making the trip with us. We traversed about 160 miles from Weston, West Virginia to Strasburg, Virginia. We're about an hour west, from the DC DC proper, I would say.
Yep, 64 miles from I-81 to the Capitol Beltway by way of I-66.
There you go. Doug, I didn't mean to cut you off there. As the video ends, did you want to throw something in there?
No, I just want to say yippee skippy, and I agree. I also want ice cream.
Guys in the Skype call, in the live chat, any questions before we sign off? We can take questions for a couple minutes here if we want. Any parting shots you guys want to throw out there, or?
I want to go get dinner.
Yeah,
I also want to apologize for interrupting people during the presentation.
Boo. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to throw anything out there, we can stay live for a couple minutes while we answer people's questions. But this was a lot of fun, guys. Thank you. We had a lot of interesting discussion along the way, and we clinched an ADHS corridor in the same sitting. So this was a good way to spend a couple hours on a Saturday night.
There is a webinar to watch tomorrow, and I can guarantee it's better than watching the Madden 21 style.
Oh, they're doing that nonsense with the Pro Bowl?
They are doing the Pro Bowl on Madden, basically using Madden 21.
Oh, God. Yeah, that'll be
so I'd say the best place to be tomorrow is right here at Roadway Wiz channel on YouTube.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that because, it's much better to watch Derrick Henry break tackles in person rather than on Madden 21. I know that the broken tackles thing on his player attributes is probably at 99, but, I'd much rather watch him do that in a live game than on Madden.
Yeah, especially when they're broadcasting a video game on ESPN or ABC or whatever it is.
Yeah. Anybody in the live chat have anything that they want to bring up last minute before we sign off? In the meantime, I'd like to thank Pat from Maryland, Mike and Laura from mdroads.com. Where's my cheat sheet here? Here it is. Josh representing Bill's Mafia. Steve from alpsroads.net. Doug from Gribble Nation.
Yay!
Great to have all of you on the show.
Yep. Steve had an Alps Roads update today as well.
Yeah, Steve, what was your what's your update today?
Mostly US 101 and California 1. But it's covered bottom to top now in the state.
Okay.
People enjoy.
Yeah, so go check out alpsroads.net if you want to see that. We have our presentation tomorrow at 6 o'clock Eastern. It will be the next installment of the Delaware River Bridges webinar series. So we're looking forward to that, and we hope you can join us for that. Guys, you guys in the Skype call have any last things you want to say before we sign off?
I'm good.
Thank you. I think I've said enough. Thank you very much for asking.
Adios.
Yeah, no, Pat. It was great to have you. I know that we've tried for a season and a half to get you on, and this was a lot of fun. So we hope you'll come back again at some point.
I will.
I know you will. We'll pester you until you do. So. With the heavy breathing in the background, whoever the hell that is, I think we're
maybe there's an exorcism going on.
I wonder if something's going on in Laura's house right now. That's my guess.
They have a ghost.
I don't know what the hell's going on over there, but you notice how Laura's not denying this, right? No, we love her husband. He's a great guy, and we love hanging out with him. But
yes, we do.
Mike, he's he's an interesting character. I'll say that. So, that's not your daughter playing with the settings, right?
No, it's not.
Okay, all right.
I still maintain there's a ghost at her house.
I could have used her as the out, but no, I didn't.
So anyway, thank you all very much for joining us for this special Corridor H virtual tour. We look forward to seeing you either tomorrow or at some point in the future in our season 2 broadcast. We still have a lot of stuff from West Virginia to cover, and we hope you can join us for that. From all of us here at Roadway Wiz, I'm going to sign off. I need some tea and lemon for my throat because I'm basically spent at this point. But until I speak to you guys again, have a good one, and we'll be talking to you all again soon.
Thanks so much, Dan. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye. Lorraine, say bye.
Hey, good night. It's been fun.
Bye, Rainey.